It's a terrific Talking Tuesday. Welcome back to the Podcast Daily. Bill loves alliteration just as much as Berm, so I got to bring it for him. That is Bill Landis.
Appreciate you.
I am Austin Ward. We are getting set. We have Ryan Day and Jim Knowles on the microphone later on Tuesday, and it is tradition, another T, to get into.
That's four.
That's far. To get into what's on our mind and what questions we want to get answered by the Buckeyes as they get set for a trip to Wisconsin on Saturday night at Camp Randall. I wrote about my 5 questions on Monday at ohiostate.rivals.com. They won't be as good as the ones that Bill has, so let's just set the expectation there. These are the ones that matter.
Some weeks for me are better than others. I think you never know. You never know how things can play out. The injury stuff, right? Like, what's up with Emeka? What's up with Travion? What's up with Denzel? Am I forgetting anybody?
Well, stay tuned. I mean, the big. There's 3 starters that are impacted. So that's, I think, where the primary attention goes. But if you want to lump Devin Brown's ankle in that, you certainly can, because that is something they've been using as part of a first-team package, really, in the red zone.
It does. They all 3, Emeka, Travion, and Denzel, seem like they're at different paths along their journey back to being able to play. It feels like Emeka is probably the closest, based off the fact that he warmed up before the game, like tried to go and then stayed dressed for the entire game, which I think maybe was more of like a, hey, I'm here just in case you need me kind of thing. Like, I'm actually kind of surprised they let him do it, because it'd probably be tempting to put him out there, even if you don't think he's ready for it.
Right.
So maybe Ryan Day will be a little more willing to discuss that individual if he is closer than like a Travion, which is like still kind of like what's going on here. And then Denzel, which is probably the least clear of the 3, right? So I don't know that we'll get updates on all 3 of those things, but that's like issue number 1, I suppose, at the top of the docket to get whatever we can from Ryan Day on that stuff. Beyond that, every week there's a segment of Ryan Day's press conference called "What Did the Big Ten Get Wrong This Week?" Which you've asked questions about before. Like, did Devin Brown score?
It was worth a look, wasn't it?
Yeah, like I'm wondering if there was any communication down. And listen, they won, right? But it's less about that and more about procedural stuff, I guess. Like, I wonder if there was any conversation down on the field about that, or if everyone was so caught up in Devin Brown at the time, like, looked like pretty devastating. Like, he was screaming in pain. Turns out maybe it was just a sprained ankle. I guess we'll see. But I thought he got in the end zone there. I didn't think it live as it happened, but rewatching the game, was like, he's like on top of bodies and the ball is like kind of near the goal line. It's like, can you take a look at it at least?
There was another 3rd down spot at a point in that game where I was like, they're not even going to consider looking at this. Like, I don't understand why you wouldn't, because there have been other games this year where it's like, hey, we're going to stop for literally everything, and then not at all for Penn State.
Yeah, no, that's true. There have been games where they've been too many stoppages. But I would maybe ask that of Ryan Day. Was there any discussion about the Devin Brown play and whether or not he scored? But then as a lead into, like, what do you do now, right? Like, because I think that was shaping up to be a fairly important package of plays for them. I know we talked about having more in there after the Penn State game, and they need to be better scoring touchdowns in the red zone. Obviously, they need to finish drives when they get down there, and they were okay against Penn State. Like, it wasn't a disaster. That one particular juncture was not great. But I also think there's something to the fact, like, well, the thing we wanted to do got blown up, and the guy got hurt on top of it. We're kind of scrambling, and then maybe we don't call our 2 best plays there to get into the end zone. But they need to figure out what they want to do now. And I don't know. Like, I know you guys talked about Wildcat on the Rooster show. Is it Lincoln Keenholz? Is it whoever? Or did they just scrap the idea entirely? I think, like, they were clearly back to square one a little bit with their red zone plan to even go to this in the first place. And now I kind of think they're back in that position again, which is not a position you want to be in when you're more than halfway through the season.
That is kind of the odd part. We'll start with the fact that no matter who it is, I don't love rotating quarterbacks. So it would be interesting to see Lincoln Keenholz get involved early as a true freshman, but you're not going to put the full package on him. It is worth a reminder that, Tristan Gebbia will be the backup quarterback for Ohio State. He's got the most familiarity with offenses, with playing college football at this level, and he's more than capable. Looked pretty actually efficient at times that we've seen him in scrimmage settings. Not enough to be higher than 3rd on the pecking order with those other 2 guys, but enough to probably get the job done at a level that would work. Even he could run in there in that package if you're insistent on using it. I don't like rotating quarterbacks, period, no matter who it is. If you want to go to a Wildcat package, that's still just another variation of that. I can't say that I would necessarily love that. But there are still 5 or 6 other people that we could rattle off right away who could do that. You're just snapping it to Xavier Johnson or Chip Trainum or Cam Martinez or any, whoever, a healthy Emeka Ibuka, like Cade Stover. You can do any number of things with that. I don't know why it has to be. You're not going to use it to throw. You're just not.
Yeah. Well, that's why I don't like Wildcat because of that, because it just eliminates the option to throw. And maybe it's because every time teams try to do it against Ohio State, it never works. I guess there are teams around college football who can use Wildcat formations effectively. And obviously there's you can do triple options and double options, all that kind of stuff off of it. It's not just merely snapping the ball to the guy behind the center and having him run through the line. But I actually, the red zone package with Devin Brown felt certainly different to me than the Tate Martell thought process, and probably even a little different than the JT Barrett one, because on the list of strengths that JT Barrett had, red zone passer is probably not very high up on that. And I'm not saying it definitely was for Devin Brown, but it was at least a curiosity that teams I think had to respect. I know that one ball he threw at G. Scott did not look great, but I liked having that element. And I am also usually pretty staunchly opposed to rotating quarterbacks for really any reason. But you're also at a point where you have to make sure you're scoring touchdowns. And they I don't know what happened with them when they get down there. They just stopped running the good plays that they used to work for them a lot. And maybe teams are scouting them and taking them away. Have we asked before? I'm sure you have asked Ryan Day before, hey, what about that KJ Hill play? What happened to that one?
Yeah.
Why can't they just do that stuff?
I usually get an answer of oh yeah, that's really easy. Thank you, Mr. Offensive Coordinator. I don't ever want it to be. This happened a few weeks ago when we saw him on a Wednesday night, where it's I don't know more about football than you, not even close. You know a million times more than I do. I ask the questions, those are successful plays. The pop pass works really effectively. You see, Chris Olave, some of the play action boot stuff that they did to the corner of the end zone. Justin Fields was really, really good at that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's I don't know where it's vanished to. And clearly, you're trying to stay ahead of the defenses. They've seen that. They've scouted it. You don't want to, let them figure it out and cause something. But trying to constantly reinvent the wheel seems to be more of an issue right now for Ohio State. Caden Curry, it's cool to see him out there, but even if I was drawing up people on the defensive line to go out there and be a fullback, I'm not sure that's where I would begin. JT is one of the most athletic people that you're ever going to see.
Yeah.
And they haven't considered that. And I'm not saying that they should put more snaps on his plate either, but of the list of people and the solutions that they're coming up with, I'm well, yeah, that is a point for creativity, but also why?
It really does just feel like they overthink things. And I'm coming at it from the same vantage point that you are. It's just that we are people who watch football and have seen these plays work in the past, and all of a sudden they're not working. So I think it's fair to ask why, and maybe he doesn't want to explain why, but it's the truth, right? They were awesome in the red zone for a couple of years, and then it just kind of got away from them somehow. And personnel changes, and I get that. It's just weird they can't finish drives, and more strange to me that they can't figure out how they want to go about it. It seems like each week they're trying something different, which is frustrating. And it didn't cost them against Penn State, right? So. And they did get the one touchdown that Mayan ran in there. So it's not like they're going down there and getting zeros all the time, but you like to see them be more efficient than they have been. And I suppose you worry about it, maybe not coming back to bite them, but maybe it makes a game closer than it should be down the road. I think that's the worry.
I think what really, really got me on Saturday was that just the week before we had seen them use the quarterback sneak, not in the red zone, it was 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1, whatever it was against Purdue, out around the 40-yard line. They went to it, they have it, they repped it, it's in there.
Looked great.
And then after Devin Brown came out with the injury, it's okay, well, Kyle's going to go back in, and then now they'll tush push.
Yeah.
Now they'll brotherly shove this one in there. And
they'll defeat it.
They didn't, and it got weird. They went to the T formation and shifts, and I think what you said is accurate. They are thinking too much about it, and I don't think that means you just line up in an I and slam it in there, because that's not seemingly working, but has worked in some other situations. Maybe you're trying too hard. I guess that's the point. Maybe that's the way that I'm thinking about it or asking about it for Ryan Day in the future. But it does he's going to be asked about the red zone, and I think the way he responds to it on Tuesday will be pretty interesting.
Yeah, it will be. They'll have some time, I think, maybe not this week. This week is a little. It's not a difficult test, I don't think, against Wisconsin, but I think it's a little bit of a tricky one. So maybe this is not a week for you to kind of work some stuff out. But I think beyond that, they might have some chances to do that with Rutgers and Michigan State and Minnesota coming before um, the Michigan game. So they got to figure out what they want to do. And I don't know. That's why I asked. I think last week, the week before, like, can't Kyle do some of this stuff? Like in terms of the running game, it's like I don't know. They're the same size. if the idea is like Devin is bigger and stronger and more powerful, it's like they're the same size. So.
Yeah, and they run about the same pace. Like that part is weird to me. So if that's you think you need to even the odds and put in even the numbers and put in a dual threat, like that would be Lincoln Keenholz. But I'm not going to pound the table and say, well, if you're going to do that, put in Lincoln and let him run. I think that would be probably playing with fire with a true freshman. Not to suggest that he couldn't do it as one, but he's only been here for 4 or 5 months, and you're opening up a different can of worms than Devin Brown a year and a half into his career.
Is it worth asking with like Devin Brown on the shelf for however long it is, like who the backup quarterback is, or you think it's obvious that it's Tristan Gebbia?
I think it's a fair question to have clarified. I mean, to me, it does seem like it's obviously Tristan Gebbia, but for the sake of having the head coach say this is what is going to happen, if something goes wrong for Kyle McCord, then you should make that clear, because there's going to be a lot of people, I think, in the week ahead who have that question, and I'm giving the reasons why I think that that's the situation that it is right now. Lincoln not being here that long, no experience at this level. Certainly trying to protect the red shirt. They don't want to burn that with, a guy who's ostensibly fourth on the depth chart. And then as a key part of the plan in the future. So like all those things factor into it. But yeah, to have him say it, there would be nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, it'd be good clarity. And it probably would be an opportunity for him to talk about both guys either way, which I think could be informative and worthwhile.
That's a way to sneak in your second question right there.
That's right. This is a different kind of reset from the Notre Dame win, right? I think Ohio State is now, that was a very emotional like last play. It wasn't exactly the same thing the way they beat Penn State, but you gear up for a top 10 matchup. You win a tight game. It's a little in the balance for basically the entire game. Like you feel some type of way coming out of that, and not to mention the physical toll in a game like that takes. And now you have to go on the road to play what I think is a halfway decent Wisconsin team. That's feeling pretty good about the way it came back and beat Illinois last week. I would like to know how Ryan Day feels about like where his team is being able to hit that reset button, because they had the benefit of the off week when they beat Notre Dame. They don't have that now. And actually, a texter reminded Doug about this. When Ohio State goes to Camp Randall, it's close. Like, there's a couple overtime games in there. There's a couple single-digit margins of victory there. I think there's a loss in there. It's not an easy place to play for. It actually might be a more difficult place to play than Notre Dame was for them, just in terms of being a raucous environment. Maybe there's some weather at play too. So the challenge, I guess, of resetting after a win like that, going to a place like Wisconsin, I think it would be difficult. So I want to know what Ryan Day thinks about it.
Yeah, and it's well worth all of the reminders that Penn State is a very good physical team. And the week after that, for college football teams, they're not NFL players yet. They may be getting paid, but they're not used to the week in, week out grind of like super physical games over and over and over. And that can be hard. You see that all the time with teams that play Ohio State and have the hangover the next week. Ohio State, we mentioned this after Notre Dame. They were fortunate that they did not have to play the following Saturday, because those were two sledgehammers going at each other for 60 minutes. And Penn State is in that same category. They are either second or third most talented roster in this league, depending on your perspective. Berm made a compelling case that they're number two. I wouldn't necessarily argue with that. Although if you're going 1 through 85, you're probably going to take some spots on Michigan over more on Penn State. But they're similar. The point is that you're going to feel it. And so this week, how you go through the process of recovering, focusing on another opponent, it may well help that Wisconsin did come back and win that game, so that you're not complacent about that. That
that's a good point. Yeah.
Even if because they would have been really reeling, and you look at that like they're not a contender in the West. You're not going to see them in Indy. Like maybe that is another part that works in favor. Luke Fickell being there, I think will obviously get some people's attention. They'll know, his legacy and that those teams are well coached. So I'm not I'm not suggesting that what you said is not accurate. I think there's all those things that are pointing in the right direction, that Ohio State should be aware of the challenge that they're facing and working to reset. But the physical part, like, there's only so much control over that you can have. Like, you're going to be hurting on a Monday and a Tuesday and hoping that by 7:30 on Saturday night you're ready.
I had not considered that the win for Wisconsin probably does help center Ohio State a little more as they go into this, or at least helps Ryan Day get the message across. Like, this team just came back from 18 points down in the fourth quarter and won. Like, they know Braylon Allen's good. They know Luke Fickell's a good coach. There are a few individual defensive players at Wisconsin that I think are like interesting, potentially impactful guys. So maybe I'm making it out to be more than it actually is. But it's just hard. Like, it's hard for any college football team to stay up week after week after week. Like, we've seen that enough at Ohio State to know that, but after a win like that, I think it's probably all the more difficult. So in some ways, it's probably more difficult than rebounding from a loss, because of, like, after a loss, you're like eager to get back out there and prove people they're wrong about you again. It's like, hey, we just did the thing you said we couldn't do. We're good to go now. This is not a question for Ryan Day's press conference. I'm just curious what you think of this. Luke Fickell did not handle coaching against Ohio State particularly well the last time it happened. Do you think he will approach it differently this time?
I think the problem for Luke Fickell, and I've mentioned this before, I love Luke. I love Brady Collins. There's people there that I have tremendous respect for. I think when the situation is that he's overmatched with the personnel and in the early stages of the rebuild, like, his hands are a little bit tied. I think it takes a full year for that start to take hold and to really take off. And from that perspective, I don't know, like, what he can do to, like, really ramp it up. He's never going to feel comfortable standing on the other sideline of his alma mater, a place where he coached for, most of his life. He's always been a Buckeye. That part is going to be weird for him. We'll see how he handles it. I'm not saying that it's like he loses all perspective and he's sandbagging or not doing anything to help Ohio State. The first time he came in with Cincinnati, that team had no shot. I mean, it just was never going to work for him. And I'm not saying that it's to that extent with Wisconsin. I think this will be the first time, like, he's doing it in a Big Ten game. That's a different mindset. And he knows that they're going to be at a competitive disadvantage in terms of the talent. Like, I can see this being different for him and different for Wisconsin next year, year beyond, down the road. Like, once he settles in there, because he did not take this job as just like a stopgap for 2 and 3. Like, hopefully Ryan Day leaves, and I'm like, this is going to be the situation. And that he'll become more comfortable, and I think he'll get a lot better at it. In Wisconsin, I think they're going to get back to being a real handful. Not saying that won't be the case on Saturday night, but I don't think that he's at the point now where it's like second nature to him, and he's going to be able to set that part of him aside.
Yeah, I'd just be curious, like, you're right, when Cincinnati came to Ohio Stadium, like, that team had no shot at winning, but I also think, like, Luke did not put his team in a great mind space going into that game by not letting his players talk to the media and just, like, making that more than it needed to be.
Yep.
If he can get this Wisconsin team in basically the opposite frame of mind from what he had the Cincinnati team, then I think that could be a tough test. So I'm just on alert for that, to, like, kind of see what kind of mood Luke is in this week and what Wisconsin might bring to the table. And it's probably worth asking Ryan Day too, like, about the changes he sees in that program now that there's not a Barry Alvarez disciple running things.
Where's Barry Alvarez? Where's he at right now? Yeah, that's an interesting question. I hadn't really thought about it for this week. I know that Luke is on the other sideline on Saturday night, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of those people. But yeah, the coaching impact, it's always worth evaluating, because that's when you go through. When I get ready to, like, look at a game and pick a game, what's the coaching matchup? Where's the game? What's the quarterback situation? Like, that's where I always start with those three things. And, like, Luke is obviously a big part of that.
Yeah. And it's a tough place to play. Ohio State does have the advantage in the quarterback matchup, though. I think regardless of what Ohio State fans might think about the play of Kyle McCord at the moment, but that's also probably something worth getting into with Ryan Day, is, like, how do you get Kyle McCord to be the guy that he is in the second half and the first half of games? Because, like, even this week against Penn State, like, he did complete his first 5 passes, right? But some of those were, like, up here, down here. Like, Marvin Harrison Jr. is making a couple of crazy catches to make sure that happens. He's just got to play more under control, I think, and more urgent. That's my opinion. But I would hope that Ryan Day might offer a critique of that to see how Kyle might be able to get better in those situations.
Some of it, I think, does go back on Ryan Day himself. Like, it has to. He's the coach. You want to put those he dialed up plays that needed to be executed better. I think we all saw
Yeah.
the slant, the screen was blocked, and I still don't know. I guess if I had any question about a throw, it would have been that screen that led to the field goal early on, right? Like should have been a touchdown, and it was outside and up here. I didn't know if the steps that Marvin took threw off the timing, and if Kyle was seeing too much pressure, had to get the ball out. Like where was the timing breakdown? Because I don't know that it could have just been an off-target throw.
Yeah.
It didn't seem like that to me live compared to some of the others that he missed, like the slant maybe. But that was one play that stuck out in my mind because there were a number of the plays that looked like they were going to execute, but that the timing for everybody was off. And some of it will fall on Kyle, some of it will fall on Ryan Day, some will fall on the offensive line. Like we've had that conversation a number of times. Like everybody is involved in that, but with some of those plays, and maybe that one specifically, like what's the issue? Because we keep saying that they're this close to really exploding, but at some point you have to find a way to unlock that.
They came back to it later in the game and got 6 yards on it, I believe. So, and like the timing looked a little better. The defensive look, I think, was not quite as inviting that time as it was the first time when it was like the seas parted. And if that play was on time and on target, I think Marvin would have scored there. But I guess it's encouraging that they, one, came back to it, like the confidence come back to it, and two, executed it better the second time they did it, which is like a microcosm, I think, of this offense all year, right? It's like sometimes in the first half, you're like, what are we watching right now? And then in the second half, it's like, oh, there it is. Okay. Which is like, it's not the worst thing in the world to be a second half team. It's just like we're not maybe always accustomed to that. So there's a little bit of a recalibration that needs to happen there.
All right. Where else you going? Skipping over to the defense from that?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, to just congratulate Jim Knowles instead of asking him a question. Like, I don't know that I have a ton of questions coming out of that game. I just thought they were really good. Maybe like, what does the strong player of Jermaine Matthews mean for them now? And like this is like only a good thing. Like obviously you need him until Denzel comes back. But even when Denzel comes back, is Jermaine part of the mix now? And I'm not trying to run a guy off the field. I'm just saying like it turns out you have another very good cornerback to use at your disposal. By the way, all that BS before the Penn State game about like Ohio State's secondary not being good. Don't print that stuff. You know it's wrong. It's terrible. Whose opinion was that? It was so misinformed. One, to give a misinformed opinion as a coach where you're just like totally wrong, and then two, as a journalist, to like watch one Ohio State game and then realize that you shouldn't be putting it out there because it's wrong.
Everybody is to blame for publishing that. Like just because you got a coach to talk about it, if what they tell you is completely off base, then don't print it.
Yeah,
like
it's embarrassing. I thought
because they must have had some reason for why they said it. And it wasn't reality. So
kudos. Unless they're living in last year, which
is another problem. If you got that quote from somebody in June or July or during a training camp tour, like then don't use it for your Penn State preview.
Yeah.
Because there's 6 games that have been played to this point that tell you that the safeties are good and the corners are really good.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what on earth you're talking about. I mean,
it made me angry. Yeah. And I'm glad. Like, I'm actually like I'm glad the game played out the way it did, so like that can look even dumber in retrospect.
These things just have to stop. Like I know that people will click on them and read them, but anonymous sourcing scouting reports where these coaches are allowed to say whatever they want and they can get that message out. Like, what if there was a really important corner or safety recruit that maybe this program was trying to land? And like, you know what? We're recruiting against Ohio State. Just gonna. Can you mention that? Yeah, get that in there.
Just put it out there that they're trash, even if it's not.
Those people that are writing that at the Athletic, they will. As long as you give them a quote, they will not question it. They will run it. Bill Landis isn't there anymore. Like he would fact check Ohio State stuff. He's gone. We can get this in now. So just trash him. All right. And my name, make sure it's anonymous. It is not like Moxley. Okay. Don't even suggest it.
We'll never know who it was. We can only speculate wildly. But anyway, I don't know what that has to do
irresponsibly.
Yeah. I don't know what that has to do with questions for Jim Knowles. But honestly, like I just like, yeah, I don't. Hey Jim, you guys still good? Good. All right, we'll see you. We'll see you this week. I think there are like this test against Wisconsin is interesting because they're trying to change their offense there, but they're not very good at it. They throw the ball a ton and they throw it very poorly. And their quarterback at the moment is not Tanner Mordecai. It's Braden Locke, who was actually Jackson Smith and Jigwa's high school quarterback. Maybe they got the scout from Jackson over the weekend. Maybe. But maybe, yeah, I guess I wouldn't mind hearing from Jim Knowles, like how he approaches like an offense that's kind of in a philosophical transition, but still has a player like Braylon Allen, who, like, if they decide they want to give the ball to Braylon Allen 40 times, like that's a different kind of bear, I think, to take on than Ohio State has faced this year. So it is probably more of an interesting spot for Ohio State's defense that I'm leading on.
What part of that will be, Steel Chambers seemed like he had a little bit of a bounce back game. Cody Simon will remain involved in that. Like, I don't believe that Wisconsin or anybody is really going to be able to go out and win a game through the air against Ohio State. And the Badgers specifically are using a backup quarterback, and they don't have a lot of standout skill talent at wide receiver. I believe one of the guys that they landed in the portal left after 2 or 3 weeks, and that was supposed to be one of their standout guys. Or either way, they lost one guy who thought he was going to be a starter and then wasn't after 2 weeks of the season. So, and that's unusual for Wisconsin. That there was a number of stories. Jesse Temple in the Athletic, who you can trust,
good guy,
mentioned that. So that had been pointed out. So it will be on the running game, and Tommy, Steele, Cody, how that all transpires, shakes out. We know that Jordan Hancock's been doing some good stuff in the nickel. Sonny will be out there involved. It seems like maybe they've turned a corner with some of that stuff, but Wisconsin will probably try to be a little more creative with their rushing attack than Penn State did.
Yeah, I think they will be. And Jordan Hancock, you mentioned, I think is a guy probably worth asking Jim Knowles about too, because he's awesome. I think he keeps getting better every time he's out there, and he was in a timeshare. I guess he's not at the moment because Denzel is out, but eventually that's going to rectify itself. And then what do you do with Jordan Hancock? Do you let him play outside corner more than he was previously? Because I think he played 20 snaps or so at outside corner against Indiana, and then basically didn't do it until Denzel got hurt. He was just basically flip-flopping at the nickel with Sonny. But I thought he looked good at corner. He looks great at nickel. I think he's one of their best 11 defenders. Turns out they have too many good defenders.
What?
They can't play 12 or 13. I wish they could. It'd be hard to score against them if they could, but they're hard to score against with 11. But what do you do? Not what do you do in a bad way, but just how has Jordan Hancock's arrival, I think, now influence what Jim Knowles wants to do with his personnel, because now that's another weapon he has at his disposal.
Yeah, it goes hand in hand with the Jermaine Matthews conversation. We'll see what kind of update we get on Denzel Burke. My read on this situation is the non-appearance on a Wednesday practice was very similar to what Emeka Egbuka went through the week after his injury. Not being in the stadium that we saw on Saturday was similar to Emeka Egbuka the week before. I think the timeline that had been described to me for Emeka Egbuka was 15 days, and he was trying to push it. It was 13, right? Or 12 to 13 on Saturday. Wasn't quite there. I would guess, this is a guess, I'm going to try and find out more, and I will try and report it more accurately later in the week if I can. I would guess that Denzel Burke is on a similar path back to Emeka Egbuka, which would mean he's probably not going to play against Wisconsin. If that speculation is wrong, I will certainly tell you. But that is where, as we sit here to get ready for a Talking Tuesday in the Woody, that would be my guess. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, and no offense to Wisconsin, I don't know that you need Denzel Burke in this. If you're playing Washington, maybe you'd have Denzel Burke out there.
Well, maybe not. I don't.
Well, if you were playing Washington prior to this past Saturday,
good version of Washington, wherever they went,
not the one that didn't score an offensive touchdown and had to return a pick six to beat Arizona State.
I've been watching a lot of Kings of the North, and I'm like, you know what? I need to stay up and watch Washington. All right. I've heard these guys are legit, and then I saw the Michael Penix that played at Indiana.
You sure did.
And I was like, I've been sold a bill of goods. What am I watching? I'm going to bed.
They did not put their best foot forward in that game. They rushed for 13 yards against Arizona State.
It was the two picks and then the fumble in the first half. I'm like, you know what? They may well come back and win this game. They might even blow them out in the second half. But I've seen enough.
Yeah.
I'm done here.
Not great. Yeah, maybe they'll bounce back.
All right. Well, that's enough Washington talk as we get ready for an Ohio State press conference ahead of the trip to Wisconsin, a different W school. Camp Randall Saturday night. We'll have a stream of Ryan Day and Jim Knowles up on the podcast, of course, on the YouTube channel. We'll have some Snappy Jays after that. There's more Kings of Columbus. There's Buckeye Q. There's everything else coming as we get ready for another huge week of Ohio State coverage and another Big Ten battle. Thanks for joining us and starting a Tuesday with us here. He's Bill Landis, and I'm Austin Ward, and we will talk to you later.